Hello, Chuck. Thanks for joining. Looking forward to talking. We met 6 months ago or so in Armenia. You lead a lot of tours to Armenia and other
Mhm.
places around the world. And so we had a great time hiking and trekking in Armenia. And then I met you again with my family, my mom and dad. Just last month, we took another trip to Armenia, had a great time all over again.
Was that only last month? Wow, that was like 3 trips ago.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Time flies. So you're a war correspondent, Chuck. What does that mean?
That means I report on chaos. You could call me a chaos correspondent. That's a more fun title anyway.
And you've been doing it a long time.
21, 22 years. Yeah, been doing it for quite a while.
What
Still
is
got all
the
my
most
parts and pieces, that's an accomplishment in this business.
And you've been in some very dangerous areas. I've seen a lot of your videos. What is the most interesting, meaningful part about being a war correspondent?
The news is depressing. When you see bad things happening around the world, a lot of times it's just makes you sad because there's nothing you can do about it. And when I go to those places and see those things firsthand, I used to get depressed like that too and feel like it's just so meaningless to come here and to watch all this misery and I just can't fix it. But then I think God showed me that I can do something about it. I can tell the story to the whole world, and then the world can do something about it. And so I feel a real passion, a real calling to go to these places because I've been specially trained through my experiences in the military and elsewhere to do this job and to go places that other people couldn't or wouldn't go and tell the story of the people that I find there so that the world can know the truth and then do something about it and hopefully help.
It's very good, Chuck. So you mentioned the military. That's what I want to focus on in our chat today. Had you, as a young man, always wanted to join the military? Was it something that you were planning to do, or did it all of a sudden emerge into your thinking and you joined all of a sudden? What was going on there?
Oh, yeah. I grew up in the period just after the Vietnam War ended. And so most of the men in my life were veterans of either World War II or Vietnam or Korea. And so I was just surrounded by guys who had been in the military. All the men in our church had been in the military. It was just natural. And I wanted to be in the military from the time I can remember. And so I knew I was going to join the military. I wanted to be a Marine all that time as I was growing up. I just dreamt about being a Marine. Problem is, I scored too high on the entrance exam and I had to join the Army instead. But I instead went to the Army Rangers and spent 4 years in the Rangers, got to see combat there in Panama, and then spent another 4 years after I got out of the Rangers. I got tired of sleeping in mud puddles and then went and learned to fly helicopters and flew helicopters in the National Guard while I was in college. So I spent a total of 8 years in the military. It was a very good experience for me, really helped me to grow up as a man. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think the military has changed quite significantly now, but at least back then, it was a very good place for a young man to go to overcome his own stupidity and have it beaten out of him by the real world.
In regard to that, you probably had a lot of training. I'm just guessing. What was that like?
When there's not a war and you're in a special operations unit, training is all you do. That's all there is to do. And so they're trying to get you ready, as ready as possible to go to combat. They can't shoot at you most of the time. So they think up ways to stress you out in your training. And they do that by making it very physically demanding, taking away your sleep, taking away your food, and grading you on everything you do. So that's the formula that they use in the training to try to harden men for battle without actually sending them to someplace dangerous. And it can get dangerous. You're jumping out of airplanes and you're running through the woods at night and you're shooting live ammunition, not at each other. There is live ammunition. And it does have an element of danger to it, but it is meant to inure you to the misery of combat, the stress of combat, and the chaos of combat. And that spending 8 years going through that kind of training, I think perfectly positioned me to be a war correspondent, because I've been through so much of it that I don't get thrown off or unflappable in those situations now, because I've just been through it so much. And that has its own drawbacks. There are definitely some life issues that it brings along with you when you're not very emotional. You've learned to turn your emotions off for things. And like, I would say there's probably more good things to that than bad, but there are some things that they're tough to overcome. My wife has learned that she can't let me drive for a couple of weeks after I get back from a combat zone, because I drive like I'm in the combat zone. And when you're driving in a combat zone, there are no rules. You just have to do what you have to do to get where you're going. And that can sometimes lead to divorce. But my wife has learned that she has to drive for the first couple of weeks after I get back, and she has to give me some time to off gas when I get back from the war zone. And we've learned to deal with it in 30 years of marriage, and that's fine.
So you said that you experienced a lot of intense training and training that you had never experienced before. Was there anything in your early life that prepared you for that in particular?
I think the physical aspect of the training wasn't as bad for me as it was for some people, because I was an extremely active kid, very hyperactive, without a doubt. I was just a tornado in tennis shoes as a kid and just ran all the time. 5 forward gears, no neutral, no reverse. And very athletic, did all the sports and climbed mountains and just basically never slowed down. So having to do that in the military wasn't too much of a stretch for me. The authoritarian aspect of being in the military, where they're regimenting every area of your life and telling you how you need to eat and how you need to sleep and how you need to sit and how you need to talk and how you need to walk, and all things that I thought I knew how to do already, was probably the most difficult part of the training, because I'm not one that deals well with authority or rules. And that was something that had to be dealt with. And like I say, joining the military sort of beat the stupid out of me. That was a good thing. Taught me that there are times when it's best to follow the rules, and there are times when it's time to step up and lead and make the rules. And there are times when it's right to be unreasonable. There are times when it's right to break the rules. And I think that's something that a lot of kids just don't get. And so there's a fine balance there that only comes with maturity. And hopefully the military gave me at least a little bit of that maturity so that I could know the difference.
That's very interesting, Chuck. You became an Army Ranger. I would like
Mhm.
to understand what that means and what that entailed.
It doesn't mean that we hung around national parks and guarded Bambi for a living. Every special operations unit in the military has its own main mission. And for example, the Navy SEALs, they specialize in doing things that have to do with water, on, in, or around the water. Do other things, but kind of their primary focus, being Navy SEALs. The Army Special Forces, that is the Green Berets, they're like the teachers. They're usually older, a little wiser, a lot more training they get. They can speak other languages. And their job is to go to other countries and raise up a fighting force in that country, train those guys to fight, and then set them loose. That's their main mission. Again, they can do other things. They can cross over and maybe do some things in the water now and then, but their primary mission is to train other forces from third country nationals. The Rangers specialize in killing people and breaking things. They are the president's kickoff team, and they are designed to be the most lethal fighting force of combat infantrymen on the planet. And so that's why the Rangers have to be the most disciplined unit in the US military, because we literally spent all our time training to kill people and break things more efficiently. And when you're training people to be killers, you must train them to be very disciplined so that they can turn that on and off. And if they're not, then they're going to become very good criminals. They would teach us things in the Rangers just in order to make us more lethal, in order to make us more effective as a combat force. They would sit around and go, what don't they know how to do that might come in handy someday? So in training as a Ranger, I got courses of instruction on how to drive bulldozers. I got taught how to hotwire cars and pick locks, and how to blow up safes, and how to break into buildings and going through the walls. I went to demolition school. I went to sniper school. I went to scout swimmer school. I went to assault climber school. I went to Army quick draw school. I mean, on and on. I went to driving courses. I went to lots and lots of parachute training and insertion training and recon training. And it's just there. It's hard to even, I could go on and on. It's hard to even describe to you the number of things that they would think of for us to do. Today's Army Rangers usually fire over 1 million rounds a year in training on the range. They are some of the best rifle and pistol shots on planet Earth because they want them to be that good. And they, as we saw in places like Somalia in 1993, they are very extremely lethal. When a force of a couple hundred Rangers ended up, they believe, there's no actual count, but in the final tally of that battle, which lasted for an entire 24-hour period, they lost 19 Rangers, and they were being attacked by something like 100,000 Somalis, and there were maybe 14 to 20,000 Somalis who were killed in that engagement. That is a incredibly lopsided battle, to have a couple hundred guys killing that many of the enemy. It's just amazing that more Rangers weren't killed in that fighting, because they were so overwhelmed and they didn't have backup. They didn't have air support. They didn't have, all the things that they really needed. So the Rangers, the job of the Rangers is to be the most lethal infantry on the planet. And I think they do a very good job at that. Today's Rangers are treated like Olympic athletes, not just in terms of their training, but in terms of their fitness. When I was in, we just ran all the time, did PT twice a day. We were super fit, but they didn't have the scientific edge to it that they have now. Now, when a guy shows up at the Ranger Regiment, he gets assigned a personal trainer, a nutritionist, and they custom tailor a fitness regimen and a diet to his needs. And these guys today, we were just a bunch of skinny guys that we were just tough. But now you show up down there and these guys are like Olympic combined with marathon runners and MMA fighters. And they are some bad dudes, let me just tell you. And so the military needs people like that. Look, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable to talk like this, to talk about killing like it's a good thing. But in reality, the book of Romans makes it clear that the people like that are God's agent of wrath against the evildoer. That there need to be agents of wrath that a nation can send to its defense, can send to accomplish things that can only be accomplished through the violent application of force. And when it comes to the violent application of force, if it's necessary, if it ever becomes necessary, then you want somebody who's very good at that. And that's what the Rangers are all about.
Well, thank you, Chuck. That's very good, very interesting and helpful to understand that. So you were part of the United States Special Forces and...
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so yeah, you need to understand that Special Forces is a specific unit. It's the Green Berets. Okay, and this is where it gets really arcane here, right? The special operations units in the military encompass all of the Joint Special Operations Command. And we're talking about everything from JTACs, the Joint Tactical Controllers from the Air Force. You're talking about PJs, Parajump Rescue guys from the Navy or from the Air Force. You're talking about Navy SEALs. You're talking about SWCS. You're talking about snipers, guys that specialize in that. You're talking about Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, everybody, Delta Force, you name it, all under JSOC, and they're special operations. But if you say special forces, you're specifically talking about the Green Berets, who are the teachers that I was telling you about.
Okay.
I know that's hard to understand, but that's just how it works.
Well, thank you for that. So you were part of the special operations in the United States military. What did it take to succeed in training and then in combat in the Army Rangers?
Just being unwilling to quit. They came through our basic training battalion. I think they even got the whole brigade together and had a recruiting session while we were in basic training. And they brought some Rangers in and they talked to us about what the Rangers do and what the training's like and everything. And then said, give us a show of hands. How many of you would like to go out for the Rangers? How many would you like to volunteer to be a Ranger? And out of the entire brigade of about 2,500 guys, I think there was 480 something guys who raised their hands. Of those 480 guys, do you know how many guys actually became Rangers? 2. Me and one other guy, Floyd Koch. So of the guys that made it to the Ranger Indoctrination Program is what it was called at the time. Now it's called something different, but that's like the selection process for the Rangers. You have to have already gone through basic training, which some people don't make it through that. Then you have to go through airborne school, which only about 70% make it through that. And then you have to volunteer to become a Ranger. And we had, I think, 155 that started in our RIP class, and we graduated 39. Okay. And those are taken from a whole bunch of different brigades all over the Army that are brought in. So it is very rare air. Let's put it that way. Becoming a Ranger is extremely difficult. The selection process is 3 weeks long. They have what they call Hell Week in the Navy SEALs, which is 1 week long. The Ranger Indoctrination Program was 3 weeks of that level of intensity. And so it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, for sure. And the only thing that kept me in it was a commitment that I made that I will not quit. No matter what, whatever comes, because I didn't know what I was going to have to face. And honestly, I needed to succeed at this because I was a skinny kid in high school. I got picked on a lot in junior high. I was like 120 pounds in high school. And so I needed something tangible I could point to and say, that means I'm a big, tough guy and I'm a man and you can't deny it. So I made a deal with myself at the beginning. They can kill me. They can wash me out. They could fail me. I might fail, but I will not quit. And that was the thing that helped me succeed. There were lots of times I wanted to, but I would think about that and I would say, if you quit once, you'll be a quitter your entire life. If you quit once, then you'll always be a quitter. It'll be easier to quit the next time and the next time after that and the next time after that. And so you should never quit something that you put your mind to. And that belief was what carried me through. I firmly believe that.
Is that belief the same belief that's required not only in training, but in combat, Chuck?
Combat is absolute chaos. And so most of the time in combat, you feel like you have about a 10% idea of what's actually going on right now, because there's just bullets flying and there's people screaming and stuff going on, all the explosions, and it's just craziness. And so obviously building that kind of mental fortitude is super helpful, but there's more to it than that. And the military really has this down to a formula, which belatedly, after I got out of the military, realized was actually something that is mirrored in the Bible in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given us a spirit of timidity, specifically like cowardice, but of power and love and self-discipline. And those 3 things are the 3 things that the military actually uses to give you everything you need to succeed in combat. So power in the military context, knowledge is power. The more they can train you, the more training you get, the more information you get in your head, the less you have to carry on your back. And when you get into a situation, the more training you have, the easier it will be to know what's supposed to be happening right now. What am I supposed to be doing right now? Okay. And so that helps you stay in the fight. Number two is love. The military works very hard to build a sense of camaraderie with you and your guys in your unit, even down to the way that they build the barracks, the shape of the day rooms and where they put the day rooms and where they put the barracks rooms. And all that is actually specifically tailored to building camaraderie between you and your squad mates. When you do that, when you get to combat, everything in you is telling you, you want to survive. You're telling you, run away, get out of here, hide. But those guys that are there on your left and on your right need you. And you couldn't be dragged away from the combat because you have to be there for those guys that you love. And there's no bond between men like the bond that's formed when you're facing life or death circumstances like that. Facing misery and hardship is a incredible glue that makes lifelong friendships. So the military works very hard to build that glue into the fabric of its training and its everyday life in garrison. The third thing is discipline. And obviously discipline is part and parcel of the military. From day one in basic training, when they're teaching you to walk right, talk right, stand right, look right, all things you thought you knew how to do already, they're doing that specifically as little discipline exercises to give you the building blocks of discipline in your life so that when you're faced with a circumstance where the bullets are flying and you want to run away, you will have the self-discipline and the intestinal fortitude to stay in the fight and to do what's necessary. So those things, actually, one of my books is on this topic, A More Elite Soldier. They come in very handy in life. And so when I was done after 4 years in the Rangers and I was getting out and getting ready to go to college, and I was seeing all of my peers who had graduated high school with me, who were graduating college at that point, and I was just starting college after 4 years in the Army. And I'd been having a great time running through the woods and blowing things up for 4 years, but I realized that there wasn't a big civilian market for those skills. And I thought for a minute that I had wasted those 4 years just out there gallivanting through the woods as a Ranger. But after a very short period of time, I realized that those three things, the power, the love, the self-discipline, had built something into me that was extremely valuable no matter what I pursued after I got out of the military. So it helped me when I was in college for sure, but it also helped me in every job I've ever had, no matter what I was doing, because being disciplined, being committed to knowledge and camaraderie, loving the people around you is a superpower in today's world. And it has helped me become very successful in everything I did. So I don't regret a minute of it.
Can you extend that thinking and logic, Chuck? Can you describe a little bit more specifically, maybe an example of how that experience in the Army Rangers shaped your career and character?
Like I say, my experience in the U.S. Army Rangers gave me, number one, a sense of mental toughness. And to the point, Rangers work so hard to build toughness into you that it almost stunts you in a way, because it becomes difficult to get excited about things that you should get excited about, or get upset with people. You know what I mean? When you get into a relationship with a woman and she gets really upset because of something that happened at work, and you're sitting there going, what's the problem? Nobody's shooting at you. That's not really conducive to a good relationship, right? So I've had to learn to be a little more judicious, or a little more tactful, or a little more empathetic in my everyday dealings. When the chips are down and something really bad is happening, and you're the guy who doesn't get upset, who doesn't get excited, who just does what has to be done to fix the problem, that is very appreciated in everyday life. So I'm glad that I got that sense of fortitude and mental toughness and physical toughness from my time in the Rangers. As you get older, you realize that the mental toughness is increasingly necessary as your physical body won't do the things that it used to do. And sometimes you just have to rely on the mental toughness that you still have to get through something, because it's just, there have been times where, especially in this job as a war correspondent, I found myself sitting in a freezing foxhole overnight, or being someplace that's just extremely miserable. And if I didn't have that experience of spending 2 months in Ranger School with 1 meal a day and 2 hours sleep a night, and walking with a 45-pound rucksack 12.5 kilometers a day, and being graded on everything I did the whole time, if I didn't have that level of stress to look back on, there are things that have happened since then in my life that would have really thrown me off, but they didn't. And I was able to endure those things because I could always go, it wasn't as bad as Ranger School. And so that's extremely valuable. That's why I always tell my boys and the young men that I mentor that they should try to embrace hardship, try to do hard things on a regular basis. And the harder things you can do voluntarily, the less the hard things that life throws at you will affect you, because you'll have built that mental toughness to going forward. I think that being in the military and being subjected to so much physicality, so much misery, and you have to use your brain a lot, but it's not in an intellectual way. After 4 years, I was really intellectually starved, and that drove me to go to college and to really want to go to college. See, if I had gone to college right out of high school, I wouldn't have really cared very much. I wasn't very intellectually curious. I just wanted to go have adventures. And the kinds of adventures that you could find in college probably wouldn't have been very healthy. Going and doing all those physically dangerous, difficult, exciting things for 4 years in the Rangers gave me an intellectual curiosity when I got out that made me really excel in college and want to go further than even my instructors were pushing me to go in subjects that I was interested in. So if I found something that I was into, it didn't matter if it was part of my college curriculum or not. I would pursue that thing to the ends of the earth. And that has stuck with me and helped me to become successful in everything I've done since then. So there've been a lot of things like that out of the time that I had in the military that have helped me to, that I've been able to put to use in my everyday life since then.
So it sounds like the mental training that you received in the military, more so than the physical training, would you say prepared you to handle difficult times in life, Chuck? Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, physical toughness, physical fitness, tactical, technical, that sort of thing. Those are all good, but mental toughness and spiritual maturity are far more valuable in everyday life. Running the race as if to win is easy to do from a physical standpoint. It's much harder to do from an intellectual, from a academic, and from a spiritual standpoint. And all of those things are connected, by the way. Every discipline exercise that I do physically makes it easier for me to be disciplined spiritually and relationally and financially and academically and every other way. Every way that I engage with life makes it easier to engage in the other parts. And every place where I'm passive makes it, it's like micro quitting. It makes it easier for me to be passive in other areas of life. So my real passion these days is to hunt down and tear out and throw into the fire every shred of passivity in my life and replace it with discipline and engagement. Because if I can be engaged, then I can be a powerful man. Engagement brings power, passivity brings weakness.
In closing, Chuck, I'm thinking about a young person, maybe a high school student who is considering the military. What should a young person do to prepare for the military, maybe even special operations?
Yeah, good question. If a young man comes to me and says, I'm interested in joining the military these days, what advice do you have for me? The first thing that I would say is not necessarily by way of discouragement, but just by way of warning that today's military is not like the military that I was a part of. And today's military has been significantly and not irrevocably, but very significantly shifted to become a grand social experiment. The military, under successive leftist administrations, has worked extremely hard to recruit people that never would have been allowed into the military before. They have lifted restrictions on, like, for example, cutting, homosexuality, transgenderism, all sorts of things like that. And so if you are planning to join the military, you need to understand that you're going to have to deal with these very thorny social issues. And so you better have those things nailed down for you before you sign on the dotted line. You'd better go to some place like this, like Summit Ministries, that does a summer program every year where they do apologetics and they prepare you to confront those kinds of issues. We sent all of my girls all went to those Summit things, and they loved them. Go to the Alert Academy or something like that. The International Alert Academy in Big Sandy, Texas is a great place for young men to go and get a really solid biblical foundation and a whole bunch of really amazing skills, like learning to be a firefighter, an EMT, a private pilot, a scuba diver, high angle rescue, low angle rescue, wilderness survival, land navigation, all kinds of really cool stuff. It's like Jason Bourne school, but with a biblical twist. And so I would recommend that if you're going to join the military, consider going to the Alert Academy first and really getting a solid biblical foundation so that you're not going to get blown by all the winds of doctrine when you get into the military. That's my first suggestion. Second suggestion is, this is a more down-to-earth thing. If you're going to get into the military, attempt to get into the smallest unit possible. So look for some sort of niche that you can get into. Don't just be an infantryman. Don't just be an armor guy, a tank driver, something like that. Don't just get into artillery or whatever. You want to be in the smallest unit possible. So what I'm talking about are things like explosives ordnance disposal, very small units. Get into a language unit. Get into an intelligence unit. Things like that. Because an intelligence company might have, I don't know, a third the number of guys that an infantry company would have, but they get roughly the same amount of money. And so you're going to get better equipment, better training, and you're going to get treated like a person. You won't just be a number. So if you need a personal day, if something's going wrong with your family, your wife is having a meltdown, or your kids have something special, whatever, you're much more likely to get given a little grace when you're in a small unit than if you're in a very big unit. And that's super important. The other thing I would say is, again, I made the mistake of just becoming a ranger, which gave me lots of experience in terms of emotional maturity, but didn't necessarily give me much that was marketable. You might want to think about doing something like combat cameraman, if you want to be a journalist, where you can get out and immediately get a job doing what you did in the military. I got out and was like, there aren't many jobs that blow things up and shoot people for a living. So what am I going to do? The guys that ended up later on getting out of the Rangers, they pretty much had a job. They could go be a policeman, or they could go be a contractor somewhere around the world and be away from their family 6 months a year. If you're not into that sort of thing, then try to get into a job that actually does what you're interested in doing, whether that's cybersecurity or, I don't know, flying an airplane or whatever. My son, when he joined the military, we talked at length about this, and he ended up becoming a crew chief on a Black Hawk helicopter. And he was in a medevac unit, so he basically was a backup medic for the entire time he was in, but he learned to work on helicopters. So when he got out, he immediately got a job with Gulfstream working on private jets, and makes a great living, has great benefits, has a wonderful family life. He's bought his house. He's got a couple babies, and he is set because he was smart enough to go get some skill along with he's still got the mental toughness. He's still got the can-do attitude. He's still got all those things that helped me in the military, but he also got a skill that he could market right away when he got out. So I would suggest thinking about something like that and really putting some intentional thought into it. Lastly, I would say that you want to be prepared by having done lots of hard things, okay? Don't be in a hurry to get into the military. It'll always be there. Go do your hard things. Take a gap year and go backpack across Europe. Go have some experiences before you get into the military. And you will be better in the military because of it, and you'll be better after the military because of it as well.
That's excellent advice, Chuck. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you very much, Chuck, for your service to the United States. And thank you for the conversation. I'm sure that many young people will find this very interesting and helpful. Any final words?
I just think that a lot of young guys these days that I talk to, they have big ideas, big dreams, like, wow, it'd be really cool to be a Ranger, or wow, it'd be really cool to be a fighter pilot, or wow, it'd be really cool to, I don't know, be a computer programmer, whatever. And they waste so much time in completely meaningless passive activity, playing video games and surfing social media and worrying about what everybody thinks about them, that they don't have the courage to actually pursue those things. I would suggest, if you're one of those very, very few young men, 99.9% of the young men that hear this podcast are going to go, yeah, whatever. They're interested in cars, girls, video games, probably not in that order. But if you are that one guy who really has a fire in your belly and really wants to do something with this little that you have here on earth, put away the passive activity and go for it. Do everything you can to prepare. Set yourself up for success, because the guy who will set aside the passive activity and actually make use of the time that he has right now will be so far ahead of the guys who are out there just playing Fortnite or something stupid that you're not going to have any competition. You're going to get the best girl. You're going to get the best job. You're going to have the best life, because all those other guys will be eating your dust, because by the time they wake up and realize, like, oh, hey, maybe I ought to do something with my life, you're going to be light years ahead of them. And the few guys that I have met who have taken my advice on this one issue have succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, and you can too. So that's all I've got to say on that.
Chuck, thank you. We'll conclude on that high note. Thank you again for helping us understand the military and how to prepare and what it's like. And it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you again, Chuck.
My pleasure. All right, Daniel, we'll see you.